me to close the door so you can
Sure,
start?
yeah. Hello, I'll go ahead and start. It's good to be with you all. Normally I have to be back in the far room behind curtains rehearsing with choir, so I don't often get to sit in on adult formation. So I'm glad to be with you all. Today we'll be talking about continuing our series of the Oxford Movement and looking at music and hymnody, a topic I am quite interested in. And I have found it quite fascinating seeing how all these pieces link together between this movement that was really quite theologically based, but then it's been applied to the liturgy and to now music and hymnody. I want to start us off by picking up our hymnals, and we'll start with a hymn together that I think will slowly come into place as the lecture goes on. You'll be like, oh, I get it. But we'll start by singing it. It's number 396, Creator of the Stars at Night.
All 6 verses. Just for you.
Thank you for joining me. Do you notice anything about that hymn? I'm going to throw it out to you guys first off. Anything strike you about the words or the music or anything in particular? Yes, Kathy. Yes, it's based on music and words from the 6th century. So it is Sarum chant, which I will get to later, but short form is that it's a form of Gregorian chant specifically based in England. So something that we can imagine the Oxford movement would be interested in reclaiming that English heritage, that medieval heritage. Yeah, so all these things will come together, but I'll start off. Benjamin Britten did draw much inspiration also from the medievals. It's the beautiful thing about having this long tradition of hymn writing, and that they come up in these cycles where it fades out and then comes back again and is rediscovered, and this bloom of new writing. So one of the beautiful things is that we have a hymnal that has this music in it. And I think we should not take this hymnal for granted. If we look in the hymnal, we can see it tells us when the thing came from. It tells us the origin. And at the very beginning, which you should never look over the preface of a book. And the preface of a hymnal is no different. It's very fascinating. I promise you. And we can see that this is authorized by a general synod and a general council. And we kind of take it for granted that we have hymnals and that there's one hymnal that everyone uses, but this was not so. And in fact, one of the greatest things that the Oxford movement had to offer us was the creation of a hymnal that united the Anglican Church and brought back these new and old hymns in one book. So I will start first by a brief history of music leading up to the 19th century. So music has always been part of Christian worship. Even before Christian worship, it was part of Jewish worship in the synagogue via the Psalms, often known as the first hymnal is the Psalm book. It is included in the Bible, and we know that they sang them with music. And then, of course, every musician's favorite verse from Paul's letter to the Ephesians, instruct each other with songs and psalms and spiritual songs, lifting up your hearts to the Lord, and so on. So the idea that we use music and hymnody is not a new one. It's quite ancient. But that doesn't mean it hasn't faced adversities. When, my thing is not loading. That's okay. After the original kind of early church, we see hymnody evolving. We recently at Wheaton College, any of you might have tuned in, might know that they have rediscovered this hymn from the 3rd century with both lyrics and music composed for the purpose of singing to the Lord a new song. So early as the 3rd century, we have these texts of hymning to the Lord. And then, of course, with Gregorian chant in the 4th and 5th centuries, we see it emerging from the monasteries, this more writing it down, and this very simple version of plain chant, which we use in our service, which you'll hear, or already did hear during the psalm, which was a form of mostly unison chanting that allowed them to set these words to tunes that would reflect them. And they were written down as early as the 9th century. And Gregorian chant actually came to England. We think of it kind of as maybe Roman to chant, but it's actually deeply Anglican. So this Sarum chant, which we heard in our first hymn, is a form, kind of a strain that broke off of Gregorian chant and came around 596 to Salisbury, or Sarisburia, hence Sarum in Latin. And it is slightly different than Gregorian. It has a kind of smaller range and a little more metrical, but follows much of those same principles. So we know that this chant and this new hymning was part of the English tradition even before. Meanwhile, across Europe, it continued to flourish, and we have these kind of growing complexities of choral music and mass settings and these processionals that they would compose for instruments and voices. And it became kind of increasingly complex, and this idea of the high Roman Mass, where maybe the person would just sit and listen to this choir sing this beautiful polyphonic thing over them that they may or may not understand the words to. So then the Reformation came in, and much of this was lost. Because of this emphasis on reclaiming and bringing back to people and to getting rid of all this extra flourishes, a lot of hymnody that actually emerged from these ancient origins was banned. And hymns were not allowed in churches in England from really the Reformation until the 19th century, which is something that I don't think a lot of us realize, that the idea that a hymn could be banned, what do you mean? So really this hymnody was not happening because there was this emphasis on any words sung in service should come directly from Scripture, which had the side note of inspiring lots of really lovely psalm settings for metrical versions, but not a lot of new hymns. So in the 19th century, we have this uprising where some revivalists, such as Isaac Watts and the Wesleys, who many of you will recognize, their lovely hymns, who I can't think of off the top of my head, but they wrote a lot. But he was not part of the Anglican Church. John Wesley was ordained as an Anglican, but by the time he was writing these hymns, he was no longer writing them for the Anglican Church. It kind of broke off to that Methodist branch, more of the evangelical, so it was not widely accepted. So the big change comes then in 1820, when we have actually two different, I don't know why my thing is not loading, two different books, collections of hymns were published. Or before that, actually in 1820, it was the legalization of hymns by the Church of England by Archbishop Harcourt of York. He compiled a volume of psalms and hymns since it had been so causing trouble. They finally agreed that they could be brought back to churches. And then in 1827, we have these two hymnals that come out. Bishop Reginald Heber's hymns, written and adapted to the weekly church services of the year, which was published posthumously, and John Keeble's The Christian Year. So Bishop Heber was bishop in the church. He had kind of more high church leanings, and he had written hymns his whole life, but never published them because they didn't have a place to be sung in church publicly. So after he died, his hymns were compiled, and you might notice it was adapted to the weekly church services of the year, which was a really big thing because it was made for the church, and through the year it was arranged according to the church year. And kind of similarly, building on that, John Keeble's The Christian Year. John Keeble, obviously the one who wrote the Oxford movement thing. He wrote, before this actually, The Christian Year, which was a collection of hymns also arranged according to the prayer book. And it did quite well. It actually was what got him recognition outside of Oxford. People knew him primarily as a religious poet. And it was called an inseparable companion to the prayer book. People would have their prayer book and also this collection of hymns that was arranged according to it. So it paired quite nicely. Unfortunately, a lot of his hymns have not really stuck in the public hymn collection. Most of them were a little too long to be sung in church, and it was also not published with music. It was just the poems. But a few of them have maintained and been set to music, and we sing one of them quite regularly. It's Blessed Are the Pure in Heart. So next time we sing that one, you can be like, hey, that's John Keble. So then after he published this book, it kind of started this searching for a book of hymns that would go along in services and kind of codify this yearning for this new music that's being written all over England, and wanting to have it in one place, in a book that we can flip to and find all of these poets. We don't want to have to get a collection from John Keble and a collection from Heber and kind of piece it together. We want one book that we can use in churches. So this was really the push after this movement kind of ran its course was, well, the next step is we need to put it all in a book and make one English hymn book. Traditionally, kind of what had been happening since hymns were legalized was in each parish, a pastor would kind of compile the hymns he liked and have a book. But it would be for one parish, and we couldn't really get more of them once they were made. So it didn't really have the longevity or the unification that one consistently published book would have. So they started putting together various committees, as often happens. And one of the really forefront of this was John Mason Neale, who, if you happen to go to our index and look up John Mason Neale, you'll see quite the list of numbers. And this is only a fraction of all the work he has done. And that's primarily because he took on this Tractarian thinking and was quite inspired to look into the medieval church and to look at all these hymns. And they were all in Latin or Greek. And he really wanted to bring them to the churches in England. So he worked with, what's his name? With a musician that is Thomas Helmore, and together they put together this collection of hymns translated from all of these ancient medieval hymns from Latin and Greek, many of which are some of the most popular ones we sing: All Glory, Laud, and Honor, and I Believe Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silence, and many, many great Advent hymns, Of the Father's Love Begotten, and the hymn we just sang. And he compiled all of these and just composed and tried to make them really fit, because they were written in Latin and Greek and set to this very plain chant melody, which works great when you're a group of monks or a choir, but for people to sing in England and just with a little more meter. And so he and Thomas Helmore worked quite hard to put these in a form that was accessible and that these words could continue to ring and connect us to that heritage, which is something he cared quite strongly about. And with this kind of push towards writing it down, they were at the point where they were like, we are ready to put together quite a few people and make a comprehensive work for all of the church. And at the head of this was William Henry Monk, who you might know from his tune Abide With Me, Evensong, or Eventide is the tune name. It's probably his most popular lasting tune, but he wrote just hundreds and hundreds of tunes. He's also a name that you'll see in your index and go, wow. So he took the head of compiling this English hymn book, which was fittingly titled Hymns Ancient and Modern, for for use in the services of the church with accompanying tunes. And it came out in 1860 without the tunes, and then was released in Lent of 1861 as a full volume of hymns and tunes, and really quite thoughtfully done. There was lots of collaboration in the preface to that hymn book. They just list all of the people who have given their tunes and their times and their ears, and it is just an astonishing number of people who really came together to make one unified hymn book. Really the first kind of modern hymn book in that sense for the English church. And it's quite well known. There are still copies of it out there, and they've made, instead of just making a new one, they continually updated it for quite a while. And it really just brought together all of this work that had been done. It used many hymns from Keeble's The Christian Year, and from Neil's translation of these hymns, as well as lots of new hymns written for this book, and by tunes by William Henry Monk and others, as well as translations from German chorales, which during the Reformation, the Calvinist side was this kind of anti-hymn, we have to do Sola Scriptura, but actually the Lutheran side of things, really the chorales flourished, and Luther, and we think of Bach and all of his great chorale preludes. And so that really was a strong tradition, but again, it was all in German. So Catherine Winkworth, another name you'll find throughout your hymnal. If you start looking, you'll start noticing her. Translated just enormous number of German chorales into English and suited them to the hymnal, which really allowed us to, not only unite with this history in England, but also with what was happening across Europe and in other denominations, really leaning into that middle way, the Anglican Church that can take all of the riches from Rome and from Germany and from its own English heritage and allow us to use them to worship. So the book was published, and it really gained quite success. I wish my thing would load. And to give a little idea of what they were actually really saying about this book, because it wasn't just kind of something they threw out there, it really was thoughtfully put together, and they say to the hymns, the preface to this book, where they express their desire for it, they say, with regards to the hymns, they have only to say further that in the very spirit, as they hope and believe, of the English prayer book, they have been gathered alike from the treasures of antiquity and from modern sources, and are the result of united prayer as well as united work. So you see this emphasis on united. It's one thing, it's prayerful, it's not just kind of this thrown together compilation, but really this idea of union and united with the prayer book. So it was organized through the seasons of the church year, which is something you see in our hymnal. We have these kind of general hymns, but then after that, we see all of the Advent hymns are together, and right after them, all the Christmas hymns and the Easter hymns. So it allows us to go through our church year and to have accessible these words that were composed for specific times, and to go alongside our prayer book and our seasons. Same with the melodies, it was quite thoughtfully chosen. So it lists all these things about the melodies in this preface, and he says that never is a tune listed in two seasons that conflict. So a tune that's listed in Lent would never be listed in Easter, because, of course, a tune must fit. But a tune listed to be sung on a Friday in Lent have enough similarities that would be allowed. And so we see this emphasis on wanting it to be cohesive and to the tunes to support the words and the poems. And when introducing the plain song, which was kind of a newer, very old, but not often sung in Anglican churches, They also included metrical versions of many of them so that a congregation could sing it and not have to feel out in the where's the beat or we wanted it to be kind of very approachable to any congregation. And so he included both the original plain chant and these metrical versions so everyone could kind of find what worked for their congregation. He says, the size of the congregation, the strength of the choir, etc., may make a quicker or slower pace acceptable, or another tune work better than the other. And he really, once you start reading these things, you just have to keep reading them, because you find all these fascinating opinions that this one certainly can't be sung fast, but if this one's sung too slow, it just destroys the whole thing, which is fair. It's Lent. We have to feel a little morseful on this tune or the other. And similarly with the pitches of the tunes, they say take them up and down as much as you want. Do what fits your congregation. We want it to be a hymn book for the people used kind of in this wide church, but also by giving them these great hymns, it equips them so they're not just kind of using whatever's at hand. They're tapping into this deep pool of rich poetry and music that has been so thoughtfully put together. And that hymn book really took off. And we see this in every hymn book really kind of since then, is in that tradition. So many things of our hymn book are directly drawn from that. We have these kind of plain chants like the one we started with, but it's written in such a way that it's harmonized and we can sing, and it has a little bit of meter to it, and it's obviously translated, and often language is updated, and it's organized by the seasons of the church, which really was not a thing that existed before the 1820s. So a rather new contrival. Yeah. Let's see, what time is it? So I'll open it up for any questions. I kind of have been talking at you. Yes. Mary.
Sydney, thank you so much for giving us some context for our hymnal and for the hymns that we sing and all these things. But I wanted to ask about our psalm tones. Could you talk a little bit about the tradition of that we use to sing our psalms and like how it's written out a little bit and kind of how that compares to other church traditions and how they sing psalms?
Yeah, absolutely. There are two ways we sing psalms. One is plain chant, which we are doing today. We do it during our penitential seasons, and it's a single line. It's unharmonized. There are a few different tones, and it just has a kind of reciting tone, and then it moves kind of with the text. So we'll do that today, and you'll hear it. And that comes from that really ancient Gregorian tradition. That plain chant was really done in these monasteries from about the 4th century onward, including in England, but was largely lost until with William Henry Monk, who compiled hymns ancient and modern. He started using it again. He switched kind of between Anglican chant, which was the more traditional four-part way of doing psalms that kind of emerged in the Anglican church from that plain song, and he started using just plain song with a single tune in his choirs, and so that kind of flowed into using these hymns that were also based on plain song. It became more familiar, whereas when the kind of 4-part chorale style of hymn became kind of more popularized, the Anglican chant kind of followed suit, and so we use that 4-part chant. And lots of those tunes were just written by people who were working in churches and got tired of the tunes they had, so they would just compose lots and lots of tunes, and kind of similarly to these hymn tunes that would fit a certain season, such as Lent or Easter, We have this with psalm tunes, where psalm tunes would be specifically composed for the psalm, so it would kind of reflect the character of it. We use a single tune because we sing as a congregation the psalm, as opposed to a choir singing the psalm where they can learn a new tune every week. We, as a congregation, choose to just sing one tune that we kind of grow with and grow in confidence. And I think it fits many. So, yes, thank you for asking. Other questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for this. We're an island of resistance in a sea of praise song. And I realized the reason I was drawn to those is I never learned to read music. I grew up on the radio, and then I go to church. I'm like, oh, cool, I can do the praise song. So for those of us who are slowly coming aboard, which is working, and I'm like, oh my, do I need to advance into those harmonies? Because I'm just going along with what you play. I mean, are you saying, hey, learn? And when we had the psalm session, it was wonderful. So how do those of us who want to be on board on this island of resistance grow? Do I need to tutor myself to read the notes?
I think reading notes is very helpful, but I would say your best bet is listening.
Okay.
Just
Thank
kind
you.
of
So it's
going with
okay.
it.
It's working. I can
Yeah,
just.
it wasn't written for 5 centuries
Yeah,
since it
okay.
came to England. I mean, we don't have written records from until the 9th century, so it was just being passed down, and this kind of, which is why it's so simple. This one line, it's this oral tradition.
That's
So,
very encouraging. Thank you.
please be encouraged. Yes. Yes. Others?
Oh, yeah. I have a question that's very, very Protestant, and yet I really feel the urgency of it in a way. That is, we're surrounded by beauty of various kinds, visual, auditory, and sometimes smells.
All the senses.
And the question I have is, what is the added value for worship of, say, setting a poem to a beautiful tune?
Mm-hmm.
What is the tune contributing something to the? Is the fact that we're singing it, we're voicing it ourselves, does that have something?
I think
more
you're saying it beautifully. We are
worshipful?
voicing it selves. I mean, we see this when we want to burst into song, is really this idea of speaking is good, but singing really just, it's elevated, is this idea. And the beautiful thing about having written tunes is to sing all together, is this really like unifying in a super unique way. I mean, to speak together and to sing together really requires a bit more coordination, but it just can move us in ways that, it's mysterious and kind of tapping into this awe and wonder that has always accompanied the music. And I think that's why Paul tells us not to just talk to each other. He says to sing. So.
Okay, that I can see that. There's a kind of communion in singing together, as opposed to listening to music.
Mm-hmm.
But we also listen,
Yes.
right? We have, you play beautiful things on the organ, and that also beautifies the situation. And how does that contribute then to the worship? Is it?
I think there's a certain amount of mystery in it, as anything contributes. We hear these things, and we have certain learned things, like minor is sad, so when we hear a minor song, maybe we'll be sad and reflective, but that doesn't always have to be true. And we have these major joyful, and we associate trumpets with all the psalms of, shout to the Lord with trumpets and sing to him with harps. And so we have this kind of added variation in expression that much of it mimics human expression, but kind of this idea of elevation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yes, we have time for a couple more.
Thank you. I've absolutely loved this. So helpful to hear the history. So if we look at our hymn book today and just connect the dots on why we have the, which I love this hymn book, by the way, but it is from the Church of Canada. I'm just curious kind of how we got from the mid-1800s to using this in our church today, if you have
I
that
don't
story.
have the full answer for why we specifically use the Church of Canada hymn book, but I can kind of fill in. So they published this work in 1861, and for the next kind of 30 years, they provided these updates. So as new tunes were composed and certain ones are like, oh, we're not so sure about this one anymore, it would be updated and they would publish new editions of this hymns early and modern. And then kind of about 30 years has been determined the life of a hymnal. New committees have come together kind of following this idea of someone kind of will head it up, but they'll draw ideas from other churches and kind of pull all of these different people and put together a hymnal, which usually takes quite a long time. So there was, I'm trying to think, I know there was the 1941 in England, which is kind of really well known, the 1982 in the Episcopal Church, and this one kind of came out around that time. It's 1972. So kind of once a hymnal would be kind of, oh, we're not sure about it, it's out of date, there are new ones we want to include. They follow this idea of a committee comes together and consults, and it usually has to be approved by a bishop and ecclesiastical committee. So it's not just kind of any words and music can go in here. It really has to be under scrupulous testing and rigorous, like, is this the music that we want our people to sing? And it sticks in your head. It's going to be in your head all day, so make sure the good words. So kind of for the next 30 years, and hopefully we have a new hymnal on the way. We're about due for one. So I think the Church of ACNA has, do you know if they've?
I can fill in.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not general knowledge, but our former rector, the founding rector of this church was Canadian. Sorry. The founding rector of All Souls was Canadian, and his wife, Carolyn, was a known choral director all over Canada. And when the church was founded, she became aware that a church was giving away all their hymnals. And evidently, I'm sure she really liked this hymnal, but it also, for a church that was just getting started, to go out and buy, 100 hymnals was a lot. But I think they are a real gift because there's such a great combination of the ancient and the traditional that I'm afraid in a lot of contemporary hymnals, they're going to have to make room for all the praise songs, so we might lose a little bit. I'm a little nervous about that.
It's a very difficult job putting together these hymnals. Everyone has opinions, and someone's favorite tune is always axed. So, yeah. Yes.
Just real quick, one thing I've noticed about these hymnals is that the tune that is maybe more popularly known with the hymn is sometimes not put with, they're not paired together.
No.
Is that, in your opinion or what you know about this hymnal, do you know if that was intentional? Or is that just like a product of the time? Like at the time, maybe like that hymn and that tune were more popular together.
Right.
Do you have any ideas about that?
I don't have the exact knowledge of what was happening in 1970 in Canada, but generally the consensus is that popular tunes with a hymn would go with it. So likely these were just the tunes that at the time they were singing with these words. So ones that we go, what do you mean? Of course this tune really might be a more kind of modern contrival. But there is a reason they always tell you the meter, and often they'll tell you which other tunes. So there are some really kind of unique mix and match opportunities, which I think is not to be overlooked. So, yeah. One last.
think the other factor in that is that there are more popular tunes regionally. So, for instance, A Little Town of Bethlehem has two very well-known tunes. One is more prominent in Canada and the UK, and one is more prominent in the US. And so what may be more known to us may not have been as regionally predominant.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah. I think we have room for one more.
So I'm looking at page 234 and 235. I've always looked at these words and never known what they've meant. Heathland 77777, Moscow 6646664. It's telling you something, but I have no idea what that is.
To explain. So Heathlands is the tune name. So each tune has a name that's different than the name of the hymn. And so this one is Heathlands, and the next one is Moscow. Sometimes they're named after composers or...
So you know when you read this, oh, that's Heathlands. Sure, I know what Heathlands is.
Right. Anyone who would know what Heathlands is.
I see. So
It's very helpful for, I mean, if you
So a
want to talk
musician
about a
who's
hymn, you're
reading
talking
this
about
is
the words.
going to know what that is, but the rest of
Right,
us.
or you can debate, oh, I like Moscow, but you like Heathlands. I don't know, you're a Heathlands guy. But the numbers after it, those are the syllables. So 77777 would mean that there are 6 lines, each with 7 syllables, which means you could find any other hymn that has that, 6 sevens, and I did it, and you could sing them to Heathlands. So there are quite a few that will be marked common meter, so CM, which I believe is 8787, and maybe doubled. But lots of them, so they can all use the same tunes. And yeah, so that's what those mean. So you can start counting syllables next time you're singing. All right, I think we should probably wrap it up. But thank you for your questions and your interest. And next time you're looking. Take this as encouragement to look at your hymnal more closely and read the prefaces and all the extra numbers and who translated it and where it came from. So that's my encouragement. Thank you.